Okay,
All right, so now.
now we're there.
And then you'll just call into this phone number. So it'll
We are recording.
give you a prompt. to enter
Ken.
or whatever, it'll be that. But that way you can call in.
Let's,
Now, if the one tap mobile works. it's on your
I need
phone,
to-
it should be.
one of you guys talk to me so I can get us tuned in here.
Hi, guys.
Let me, hold on,
There we go.
get myself.
Then,
So, all right. Did you
Testing
try it
1, 2,
again?
3, Lee. Hi, Lee. Hello.
Okay, hold on. Let me try this.
yeah, the 312. This one up here, sorry.
I don't,
And then it'll ask you to enter.
Yeah, I'm not muted.
I can't.
I'm gonna
Hi,
mute.
Ann.
Hello, I'm muting because I have allergies and I'm
I'm getting
hacking.
closer. My volume's
That's
way
okay.
down.
Well, okay. Well, at least we know our part's working.
So I'm muting because I would clear the room.
Oh,
Yeah, talk with each other while I figure this out.
okay. Oh,
Let's see.
Yes, they're angel cats. I know, that's why I have.
Rats. That's not
my
it. I gotta
son's
get
coming
to the,
over after this, and we're going to try to set up my new computer with all my computer software. And to take it off of my computer that's dying
I haven't had mine.
quickly,
I did go in for a second.
because I have several $1,000s worth of computer, embroidered designs and computer software for embroidery that's on this computer that is on its very, very last legs. I'm charging that computer right now. I haven't even touched it for a couple of weeks.
Well, it's.
I have an allergist appointment Tuesday.
Oh,
I never thought tree pollen would be so bad.
Anytime Tuesday afternoon.
now, so far, knock, knock, knock,
I have to
I
look at my
haven't been
calendar.
bad
Okay.
here.
Ask me about that.
But when I was at Easter, I was down in Ohio, and of course, they're several weeks ahead of us. And I had been there less than 12 hours, and I had no voice.
That's what's wrong. Who turned the speaker down? Try it again. Somebody talk.
Hi, Lee.
Okay, that's better.
Okay, we gotcha.
Yeah, somebody turned the speaker down inside the app.
Well, I have a phone that does all that kind of stuff all on its own. It's really lots of fun.
Okay, there we go now. Now I think we're able to do this. That's auxiliary. I may have to readjust you more later, but right now we appear pretty good.
Okay.
I gotta put in my SD card. We're here.
All right, we're all set.
I think we're all set.
Okay.
I have to tell people that are on Zoom that if they have something to boisterously say, I have a question, because we aren't always, we're not always going to be watching you guys. So you'll have to speak up if you got a question.
Okay. Oh, gee, I can't speak up ever.
Why don't I believe you?
Who is?
Hey, she's coming through the house. Yeah.
I'm still adjusting.
Aren't we all?
Everybody? I'm gonna ask. See, we got somebody just pulled in, so once they get in, oh.
Okay, Lee,
Yeah. Yes.
Brandon is very difficult to hear.
Cause I'm not right on the mic.
Yeah, you gotta be
Bring it up.
closer for the mic.
All right, is that better?
A little bit.
All right, I'm gonna have Pastor Brandyn pray us in, and then we'll rock and roll. It's a
Okay,
beautiful day.
well. Microphones so people can hear. But first, I'm going to embarrass my husband because today is his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Mike.
39 again. Only 39.
Okay, let's pray. Thank you, God, for bringing us together this morning, for helping us learn more about being your body, the body of Christ, here on earth. We pray that you will guide our learning, that you will give Brandyn the wisdom and help him utilize the skill he already has to teach us what we need to know by the power of the Holy Spirit, and help those lessons transform us by the power of the Holy Spirit, so we can become a church that is revitalizing and always revitalizing. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Let's see. Ask you with advanced slides sometimes.
Long court.
Yeah. All right. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, conflict. Woo. Everyone's like, oh, God, I'm out of here. So we're not just going to talk about conflict being bad and icky. We're not going to talk about it being something that needs to be shoved away or mitigated. We're going to talk about conflict as something that can potentially be healthy. But in order for it to be healthy and to transform it into something healthy, we have to understand what it is and where it comes from. So we're going to start with what we call systems theory. When considering the parts, the whole must also be studied, as each part and function interferes with another. All are interconnected and interdependent. So in other words, if you have a whole, which is the congregation, for example, and then you have the parts, the individual people or the individual ministries or teams, all of these affect one another. So if there's a pervading culture, for example, that's going to affect the individuals and how the teams function. If the individuals are doing something, they are going to affect the culture or the entire system, and that's going to change as well. Okay, so we have that interdependence going on. Okay,
Is it the right arrow?
yeah, thank you. So the elements of general systems is that the whole has qualities that none of its parts have. Okay, so when you look at the whole entity or the whole congregation or the whole corporation or whatever type of system we're dealing with, the team itself could be a system, right? That team has qualities that not every single one of those parts have, right? So this individual may have certain characteristics that the entire group doesn't have, and the group may have characteristics that that individual doesn't have. The qualities of the whole are reflected in each of the parts. So while they may not have each of the traits or characteristics, there is a reflection of the whole group or the whole system in each of the individuals. In other words, they're affected. And so, for example, if you have a toxic culture, eventually the individuals start to kind of mold or conform to the system and become a little more toxic. What happens with the whole influences each part. So it's an example I just gave. What happens with each part affects the whole and other parts. So if you have positive people, if you have negative people, if you have people who are apathetic and so on and so forth, those individuals are going to affect those around them. And they're also going to infect and affect both the entire system. So think of COVID, right? It's a good example. It's an infection, an infectious spread that starts with one individual or a couple and then affects the whole system. And that can be done in a positive way or in a negative way. What happens with each part affects the whole and the other parts, and then each part reflects the whole and all interactions. So you can think of that as if the system is a stressful or burnout-inducing system, then each individual is going to embody that to certain degrees. And over time, they're going to embody it more, where people will either just get stressed out and leave, or burnout, or whatever. And the opposite is also true, right? If you have a positive, vulnerable, healthy culture, then the individuals are going to start to conform towards that as well and reflect that entire system. Okay, so we've got systems theory. Now we're going to look at transition, because we know that all churches do transition perfectly. Glad you caught that. If you didn't laugh, I'd be really worried. Okay, so Bridges' theory of transition says that transition is very different from change. And don't we usually use those words interchangeably? Yes. Right? But they're not the same thing. Change is situational, right? Change happens no matter what. If the neighborhood around us changes over time, that's just change. If change pastors, that's change. But it's not the psychological process that needs to be done in order to adapt to the change. Okay? So transition, on the other hand, is a 3-phase psychological reorientation process that people go through when they're coming to terms with change. It begins with an ending, which is with people letting go of their old reality and their old identity. And unless people can make a real ending, they will be unable to make a successful beginning. So we're going to do a whole session on transition. So I'm not going to go too deeply into it today, but just understand that change is inevitable. Pandemic, for example, right? And the transition, how we adapt to that, is a psychological process of letting go of what was, and then that grief process or whatever it looks like in the middle, and then the new beginning. So we're gonna, when we go into it together, we're gonna use the Exodus story as an example of leaving Egypt, going into the desert, and then going into the promised land. Kaylee?
All right.
So just so far, understanding general systems theory about the whole affecting the parts, parts affecting one another and the whole, and then an understanding of the difference between change and transition. How might these things potentially lead to conflict?
What,
They're not on the same page,
Who's not?
the individuals and the majority, I guess.
Yeah.
remember, so everybody else can hear.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Microphone, you gotta use Mr. Microphone. She's still on camera.
The individuals, when the individuals are different than the majority of the system, then there's going to be conflict.
Mm-hmm. So like you said, when they're not on the same page.
Not on the same page.
Right? So if there are individuals who are of different mindsets with one another, conflict can arise between one another. If the individual, say there's somebody who's an outlier, considered like a scattergram, right? And mindsets are all kind of in one area, but you've got one or two that are outliers. That can create a conflict with the whole system or with some individuals in the group. What else? How else might conflict arise? And I should specify, how else might negative conflict arise?
I think that conflict can arise when you have people who pick on like minute little things instead of looking at the whole. And so it's just like pick all the time. And to the point where it gets really annoying.
Yeah.
So, and then it affects the whole.
So some people are focused on the minutia or the things that don't really matter, right? And we have to discern what's important and what's just a nitpicky thing. So we're going to talk about the general idea of trying to transform those situations, for example, into something healthy and positive. But what happens when you have those, call them nitpickers, call them bullies, call them toxic people, call them whatever role they play? It's another thing to consider in systems too, is everybody plays a role. It's not always intentional, right? So I think I may have used this example before. True example that's probably happened in every church in some form or another. Barbara's family donated the fine china to the church. There's this group that's using the church. They're a Cub Scout group. And doggone it, they've been told don't touch fine china, but they keep using the cups. So Barbara comes in one day and puts padlocks on the cupboards, so those little brats can't touch the fine china.
You mean like the ones in the cabinet back there?
See, I told you, every church has a Barbara, right? Now, Barbara's not a, whatever you want to call her. Maybe. Maybe.
My name is Barbara.
Oh, see, I told you.
And so is mine.
See, Barbaras are nice ladies. I had a step grandmother who wasn't, but anyway, that's another story. And she probably played that role in her Methodist church. However, she's playing a role. She doesn't realize it, right? And within the system, there are different roles that people kind of slip into. You've got the instigator, you got the people who put their foot down and will have their way no matter what, even though it really doesn't matter, and so on and so forth. However, when there are people who are continuously toxic and don't choose to transform the conflict that either they're instigating or a part of into something healthy, what do we need to do?
Confront them.
Confront them, yes, that's the start. And what do we say?
You know, like
Keep it
you're
up.
doing. Yeah, I don't, that's the problem. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, that's a good point. But so we've got mitigation and transformation, right? So now we're in the mitigation process. So yes, the first place you want to start is with questions. Remember, questions create a shift. So if we go to somebody who is constantly instigating and we tell that person, dude, you are wrong. You just need to shut your mouth and sit down because you're a troublemaker. Good luck. Right? Them spotting words right there. So what you need to do is start asking questions and try to be empathetic about it, right? Why is this important to you? How can we help you to get what it is you need? What do you need? And it causes that person to think, well, wait a minute, what do I need? What is really at the root of my anger or aggression or instigation or insisting upon having my way or, right? Then, if that doesn't work and you'll go on down that line of questioning, then what? If they're, no, I don't want to hear it. We're having blue carpet. I don't care what. This is a hard thing for churches to get to. What needs to happen? Imagine you're sick and you have an infection. What's the doctor going to try to do? Give you medicine. And what does the medicine do?
Hopefully clear up your.
Microphone, please.
Hopefully clear up whatever's wrong.
Hopefully clear up the infection, right? In other words, get rid of it. And it's so hard to say, right? And churches are bad. Well, we're good Christian people. We accept everybody, even the bullies and the jerks and the. No, you don't. We are human beings. We have our flaws, we know that. And we also have a choice. And if somebody chooses to be toxic, then sorry, you got to be removed from the system, because if we're called to do God's work, we need to do it in a healthy way. So I just wanted to name that because that's one thing I don't think that we call out enough in churches, is that sometimes, not always, it's not the immediate thing, right? Oh, you're a jerk, you got to go. No, have conversations. Let's do this dance and hopefully do it well. But if it gets all the way to that point, then we have to be willing to say, we love you, we don't like the choices you're making right now, it's affecting the group, and we're gonna have to ask you to go. And if you, hey, if you want to think things out and, and figure things out, great. And we're not even asking you to, we're not saying, when you agree with us, you don't have to agree. Let's disagree. That's a good thing, and we're gonna get to that. So let's put a pin in that. Lee, can you advance us?
Yeah.
All right. So we're looking at change, types of change that can lead to conflict without a healthy transition, right? So if there's not a healthy transition, can lead to conflict. Change of leadership, right? Get a new pastor, new council moderator, council president, whatever you want to call it. That can cause some frictions and tension if the process isn't done correctly, right? Which is why we have interim ministers and intentional interims and all the other designated, right? All these other titles that we use in the UCC, but transitional ministers, because you don't want to go from one settled pastor to another settled pastor without going through the desert. Okay, a pandemic. We've seen it in so many churches. So many churches that were already struggling closed because they didn't either know how or weren't willing to do the technological work, human work. The context evolving around the church. Again, as we said last time, this neighborhood doesn't look like it did 30 years ago. It may not look like it did 10 years ago, I don't know. But that's change. It's long-term change, but it's still change. And so there has to be a transition in here if the folks in here don't look like the people out there. Right? That's true in where our church is, a Japanese American church on the north side of Chicago in what's considered the most culturally diverse neighborhood outside of Manhattan. And Japanese American people, and you look out the window and you see somebody walk by in a yarmulke, in a hijab, and a burqa, and right, it doesn't look anything like the rest of the neighborhood. The building to my left is mostly Romanian and Russian people. Across the street, they're mostly Thai. Right over there, most of them are Moroccan and Algerian. I mean, and this is just within 2 buildings from my house, which is connected to the church. Right? So what do you do with that? Change in bylaws. I heard a chuckle. Yeah, right, that's always in this, that's, doesn't mean it's not necessary. It's not to say, no, don't ever change bylaws in a church. No, that's the the bylaws probably need to be changed, and that's part of the transition, right? To meld with the change, especially when it comes to terms like membership and what a quorum constitutes when, you used to have 500 people in a congregational meeting and now you got 30. Well, if you're asking for a quorum of 100, guess what? You ain't gonna get it. So you're gonna break the bylaws, or you're gonna have to change them, right? But when those changes happen, some people dig their heels in for whatever reason and don't want to have it. Change in structure. So if you consider the organizational structure, maybe you stop calling them ministries and start calling them teams. And evangelism is now called outreach, and right, and you start to change things around. It's not the way we've always done it. No, thank God it isn't. You need to change, but you have to transition in the change. So what else? Whether they're real examples from here or hypotheticals.
Hi.
Yeah.
One of the things could be a change in the church that I went through. They lost their building. And so we had to find another space, and that caused an awful lot of conflict, and yeah.
That's a great example, yeah. So losing the building is one thing, selling the building is another thing. Sometimes it's synonymous, but we use different terms for it, right? Sometimes you might sell the building to another congregation and rent it. Sometimes you might just completely sell it and it becomes a mosque or something else, and you go and share space with another church. Well, guess what? Now you got two different systems that are coming together here, and right, there's lots of chance for conflict. Yeah, it's a good example. Thanks. What else? Yeah.
I think, as we'll all admit to ourselves, all of us here has experienced a lot of conflict over the last 10 years, 15 years, because we keep shrinking and we keep selling stuff and we keep changing stuff. And that's very difficult for some people, you know, especially those of us that grew up in the church. At the same time, it's inevitable. You can't fight City Hall, so to speak. And so we're trying to, at least I am, roll with the punches, and this might not come out exactly right, but make the best of it and still try to understand what God's telling us.
Thank you. Anybody? Oh, well,
I got the microphone, right?
yeah.
And I'm not gonna drop it. In a ministry meeting, telling a pastor that the sermons are too long or the music doesn't fit. Now, we got the wrong music. Not that you can't have evaluations, but when you do it in a way that cuts them off at the knees, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel good. And I like your method of questioning, because we tend to want to say, okay, you're out of here. I'm right, you're wrong. We live in a black and white world, and that's a pandemic of what's happening in the politics right now. And so we need to find a way to have evaluations in a way that is constructive, in a way that shows compassion and shows mercy. And it means living it 24/7. It doesn't mean Sunday for 1 hour. And until we own it and live it, we're hypocrites.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So it's not that those conversations shouldn't happen. It's not that you should never go to the pastor and say, I feel like your sermons are a little long, you're losing us, or I can't follow along, or the service is too long, or the music doesn't speak to me, or what. My congregants have those conversations with me. Now, here's the funny thing about Japanese American people. They won't tell you anything straight on. It's very circuitous. So eventually, months later, I'll hear it from the council moderator. Well, people are saying, it's like, well, who the heck are these people and why are they not talking to me? But that's another thing. White congregations don't do that. And everyone has that. So what needs to happen is those conversations have to happen, right? Like Larry said, you gotta be able to ask the questions. How can we find the sweet spot together, right? You're going on, hey, it is football season and the Bears are starting in 15 minutes and you're still preaching. This is the problem. For example, okay, because I'm always kind of like, oh, time for me to shut up. Get next door and turn the TV on. So the conversations need to happen, but the conversations have to be gentle. The conversations have to be kind. Right? They have to be empathetic. And to your example, Lee, we talk about if the context around us changes, well, what the heck about in a year, right? If this is changing, like we've gone from 500 people down to 30 or whatever, or we just don't have the human power to do the things that we used to do, or gosh, I love when we used to do coffee and cookies and stuff after church, but now we have nobody who will step up and do it, and so on and so forth. Yes, you got to roll with the punches. And it's not just a, grin and bear it. It's not a, buck up and just deal with it. Let's transition through it. And what needs to happen? What do we need? I was listening to a podcast yesterday. I was driving back from Minnesota, so I got to listen to a lot of podcasts. And one of them, the guy was talking about how there are these 3 stages of I guess you'd call 3 stages of becoming. And I think they're true for individuals and for groups. One is when you realize that the world isn't what you thought it was and or isn't what it used to be. And that creates a tension within you and you're like, gosh, this feels icky. I just don't want to deal with this. But the second stage is when you lean into it, when you go into the darkness, so to speak, as this Carl Jung talks about. He gave an example of a Sufi legend. I can't remember his name, I think it was Nuruddin. And the man, Nuruddin, was outside under the gaslight in this little village around the halo of the light inside there, just looking and looking and looking. And one of the villagers came along and said, Nuruddin, what are you doing there? He says, well, I lost my precious gold ring, the one that I love so much that I always wore, that my father gave me. Oh yeah. He's looking, he said, well, you're looking right here. Did you look over there? And he says, no. Then why are you looking right here? He says, because this is where the light is.
Okay.
Oh, right, okay. Well, it's usually in the darkness where we find the treasure, the true self, right? It's leaning in and through those things. And then once you come out the other side, he says the third phase, when you emerge resurrected. Well, gee, I wonder why we go through the wilderness during Lent and then supposedly experience resurrection at Easter as if it's a one-time thing that's boom, oh, I feel so much better. Everything's all healed and great. And no, it's not. But Easter is just the beginning of the resurrection, right? It's the time when you start to be brave enough to lean through the dark stuff and come out the other side. And it's incremental. And the same thing is in a corporate setting with grief and healing and conflict and things like that. It's incremental. None of us has a magic wand to make it all just poof, all better. Any other examples or thoughts of situations of change that might lead to negative or unhealthy conflict? Yeah, Mark.
I got the microphone now. I stepped out for a second, so I don't know if you talked about societal change or cultural changes to, the bigger picture. When I was a kid, everybody that I knew went to church, and everybody's family had a church, and that's a lot different today.
Yeah, that's not a good one, right? So we talked a little bit more about ethnic makeup changing around us, but there's also the cultural, right? The habitual, if you will. It was a given back in the day that you go to church.
Yes.
That's what you do. Well, that's not a given anymore. You're either sleeping in or watching cartoons or playing soccer or whatever, right? And then you get into these conversations like, well, if those darn sports teams wouldn't schedule games on Sunday morning, the kids would be here.
Yeah.
Newsflash, oh, they wouldn't. It's not the sports that's keeping them away from church, right? It's the shift in culture. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing, or can we learn to live in the middle, right? And it's not the black and white in reality, right? It's the mystery. It's the gray area where true life exists, where we exist if we are brave enough to do so. So we have to lean into that and say, okay, well, what is the real reason they're not in church? Well, if we had conversations with them and find out why they're not in church and accept their answers. Well, I don't have any interest. Well, don't you feel like you need God? Well, yeah, but I find God with me all the time in conversations with my friends and when I'm hiking in the mountains or sitting by a stream. Well, what about social justice? We do social justice. Yeah, I volunteer for local nonprofits and I do community organizing and I don't need that in church. Community, we're nice people. You need community. Yeah, I have that with my friends and the people over at the VFW and the people over at Lions Club and I can't be accepted. Some people just don't go to church. That's okay. And then we start to do for the people who are here. Start to attend to the needs of the people who are here. And then use that as leverage. So I think I gave this example last time. I have a master's in geriatrics. And another newsflash, there are some older folks in churches. and their caregiving spouses or children also attend. So when you have somebody who's in their 50s or 60s or even 40s who's caring for, their parent who's in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they need resources. They're burned out. They're already burned out. And then we're saying, hey, can you serve on the such and such committee? Sure, I'd love to. Right? But if we provide for our caregivers, so I started a caregiver support group. Well, guess what happened? They started telling their friends, and they're like, seriously? I could use that, learning from other caregivers, knowing we're not alone, getting resources. Okay, I'm there. And guess what? We start growing. Now, does that mean that every single one of those caregivers has their butts in the pew on Sunday morning? No. But is that what being the church is all about? No. It's not about what's in the pews on Sunday morning, right? How many worship services do we see Jesus lead in the Bible? How many healings and gathering people and showing them that they already have the resources? The feeding of the 4,000, the feeding of the 5,000, right? Just saying. All right, so now, remember, it's about questions. Remember the quote from Rilke, right? Don't try to find the answers because you wouldn't even understand them. They're like locked books, right? Live the questions, and perhaps someday in the distant future, you'll live your way to the answer. So some of the questions are, how is the system affecting the parks? In other words, what cultural factors do we have that are leading to conflict? Which then tells us, oh, well, here's something we need to change. It may be a culture that allows for things that are unhealthy. It may be a culture that is less vulnerable than it needs to be. It may be a culture that a certain group of people rule the roost, right? Do a power analysis and you find out, oh, that's funny. It's not the people with titles in the church who have the power. It's that person sitting always in the back pew, but when she says jump, 40 people say, how high? Those are things we need to know. How are the parts affecting one another? So we need to learn how to go to the balcony, right? Go up. Remember, we talked about when you're on the dance floor, it's hard to see over each other's heads and see exactly what's going on. But if you go to the balcony, you can see how people are dancing and how parts are affecting one another. In order to do that as a leader or any individual to get to the balcony, what do we have to do for ourselves? This whole thing is vacant. Wink, wink. Ask questions. We have to ask ourselves questions, right? What am I curious about right now? What am I observing? What am I experiencing? How am I feeling icky about what's going on? Why? Where's that coming from? And gradually you go up above the system and you can start to not only see what's going on, but you can see what role you play in the system, right? And that's why I'm here. Because Pastor Brandyn is smart enough to know that when you're part of the system, it's really hard to affect change in the system. So you bring in somebody from the outside who can go up to the balcony and say, let me ask you about this, right? But then we all learn together to be able to do that. How are the parts affecting the system? What boundaries and covenants need to be in place, right? We did that months ago. I'm sure some loved it and some, right? Just the nature of the beast. Okay, but we have to ask that. And if the covenants aren't honored and the boundaries are breached, that's when those conversations of this may not be the best place for you start to come up. And then what are the non-negotiables? That is, what are the values of the church and what needs to be let go of? So many times, especially in churches, but it happens in any organization, it's in the Bible, right? Wherever two or more are gathered, conflict will arise. Or isn't that what it says? I think it's in Matthew. what are the non-negotiables? What are our real values, right? What's our anchor? What has God called us to be right here? Then when we know that, we can say, wait a minute, why are we bickering about this? It has nothing to do with our values. But if we don't know what our values are, everything matters, or so we think. Any thoughts or comments on this before we move on?
Brandon, I'm reflecting too with conflict that Ron and I were a part of a different denomination where 3 churches that were decreasing in size made the decision to come together. We were only part of the first process, like making phone calls, getting the church vote, the quorum you talked about, that sort of thing. But we had moved to Missouri, so we weren't a part of the hard work they must have done, as you were talking about. I can only imagine how hard that was. Can you imagine 3 churches sitting down and saying what? They moved to a totally different building, but other than that, saying what material goods from each of those 3 churches had to come into place. The beauty that came out of it, and it's a very thriving church today, is that yes, the opposite of what's happening here. They have plenty of people everything's prorated. It may be a congregation of 300 and now 100 active people, but it's prorated and they still have people to do the different committees and such. I think Ron and I, when we attended pre-COVID, you know how that was, we're just so refreshed to be in a smaller congregation that look at the history you have. But I think what has opened up my eyes now as you're discussing this, Brandon, is even within a relatively closed system, that there's still change. And change, I love how you've put it so far, is that we still all have to go through change. And so I think as newer attendees of this church, what Ron and I in the discernment last August experienced was feeling that this church would not be moving toward revitalization. And we had more of a closed-minded, all or nothing. Well, I don't know how that's going to work for us, because we would love to see this church grow and bring in more people, etc. But we weren't getting that feeling. And so I believe that's why we took a step back at Christmas. But I can share with you today that I am very much closer to coming back. I don't know if Ron will, but that's changed too. And that our gifts, we all have gifts. And we're being called to use our gifts. And even if it means it isn't revitalization, I can see as a congregation your tradition and years in this church. But we don't know 3, 5, 10 years from now if we'll still be in this building, be a congregation. But that doesn't mean, I think one of the members said something about, why do we come to church? It's in our bones. And this time away from church has made me realize it's my identity. It's who I am, and it's time to come back.
Thank you for some real and vulnerable examples. I appreciate that. It reminds you, your word is like a fire in my bones, and if I do not speak it, it will consume me. You can run all you want, get thrown into it. Yeah.
Just before you go on, if I hear what you're saying, because this is presenting sort of a new idea to me, because we have said, throughout this attempt to revitalize, we need to change. But I hear you say, really, we need to transition. I like that there's a step here, or there's a process that I never thought of, because you're saying change is going to happen whether we change or not. In fact, it's already happening. So what we need to do, or what I need to do whenever there's change, is transition. And then you're saying there's actually kind of three steps or three things you got to go through to transition and hopefully end up where you're ready to have a new beginning. And that new beginning could be a change, actually, but I like that idea of transition. So, because I've often asked myself, I know we need to change. Do we know how to change? I've never been in a church that has had to change completely, as I think we do. So how do you start? So the same thing with transition. How do we know where to, if we're at that point where we want a new beginning, how do we know what to do to transition? Should we, and if we feel we don't know, then should we actually listen to some experts, some leaders, or let someone help us know how to start and kind of put our faith or our investment in that person or that source? I don't know if that's something you can, and you may be answering this as you go along, but I really like thinking in terms of transition rather than just change.
Yeah, you're right on. It's a process of, first of all, reading the system, the internal and external systems, right? The bigger system, and getting a better picture of where are we actually at. Where we think we're at and where we're really at are usually two different things. Okay, so here's what's actually happening. Here are the changes that have already happened and are happening now. Now, how do we intentionally transition to adapt to them in a healthy way? And then once we're finally centered and anchored, then we can know where we need to go from here, because we have the information we need and we're centered. Think about it when you're at work and you're all stressed out, or your family's stressing you out, or that sister-in-law or whatever, right? And you're, but then think about the days when you do the time to do your meditation or your yoga or your journaling, or sit outside and watch the hummingbirds while you drink your coffee. It's a whole different world you're dealing with, it, right? You're coming from a very different place. You're centered, and everything doesn't seem as trivial or as bad as it was. It's kind of like, it doesn't bother me as much because you're more aware of where reality lies. So yeah, we have to understand what changes have already happened, what changes are in process and will always be in process. How do we transition through them? And then, more importantly than bringing in an expert who can tell you how to grow your church or whatever, is understanding yourselves and knowing what questions to ask yourself, right? I'd rather have somebody come in and ask me the right questions than give me the right advice. Because the advice isn't, hey, I'm not going to buy into it. I learned that as a consultant, right? Okay, I'll tell you what to do. Here's your bill, here's your report. Have a nice day. You think most of the people followed through? No. Even though they wanted me to tell them what to do, it's like being UCC and talking to the associate conference minister, their conference, or the wider church. It's like, tell me what to do, but don't tell me what to do. Okay. We buy in when we have the right questions, and it's our idea. Right? You're going to say something?
Who's got the mic?
Good question. There we go.
There it is.
We have to remember that there is no consultant who can tell us what to do. There's no cookbook approach.
Yeah.
We each have our own context. And if we don't realize we're in partnership with God and co-creators, forget it. And the discernment process is a part of this. And we have to own our faith. We have to commit to something. And some of us, I'm a retired accountant. I like things I'm a straight line thinker. You give me, I'm a process person, and I can do that. But that's not God's way. God loves people like me because he really wants me to wrestle with things. And there is no, if we're expecting at some point, we're going to get 7 steps that will tell us how to revitalize. And we own them, and be a little dramatic here, and we own them, but we have to be adaptive. We have to be flexible, because sometimes we think we've set up a goal, because you can't go on a journey and not have a plan. But once you have a plan, you have to realize part of the plan is when God throws you some curves, like an offer to buy the building, two people who want to rent it. A Sunday, Easter Sunday, where we had like, what, 70 people in worship. We're getting all kinds of little signs, but it's kind of like God's getting frustrated with us, kind of like he did, with the Israelites back in the Old Testament. And they just didn't get it. And so we don't need to own our faith. We need to know whose we are and whose it is. And we have a called pastor, a designated called pastor at this point, that has some gifts and some experiences and knowledge that can help us in this discernment process. And we need to honor that.
Yeah, it's about the elders or the wise folk. Thus I have seen, right? This I've experienced in the past, because I've been around the block a few times. And it does us a lot of good to listen.
While we are considering the questions for ourselves, right? It's a process together. And there is no one size fits all. I'll give you an example in my other realm or my other world, when I'm not pastoring or coaching churches, I do executive coaching and M&A advising, right? So you may have a private equity company or a larger company that's going to take over this tech company, or you may have them taking over a manufacturing company. But the way they do it, it's going to be very different depending on what type of company. And right, and, okay, well, we're going to offer you 70% in cash, and then you're going to have a 3-year earnout to get the rest. Or we're going to give you 60% cash and 40% equity, or just depends on the situation. And it's the same thing in churches. We think because we are the people of God, there's one size fits all, that we're just searching for that magic wand buried in the haystack, and it ain't there. It's here. It's here, right? And that's what we need to learn. To trust ourselves, but not to the point of being cocky or haughty, but to trust that God has placed the answers within us, and that we find them by asking and discerning the right questions together, right? From a place of what our own gifts are. All right, so we're talking about conflict, but churches, I may have mentioned this last time, a lot of times churches will talk about things, but we don't ever define them, right? So for example, salvation, well, we're church people, we know what salvation is. Really? Resurrection, the gospel. What's the gospel? Well, it's John 3:16, for God so loved the world. Okay, what do you think? What's the gospel? Well, it's Luke 4, it's sight for the blind and freedom for the oppressed. Oh, interesting. We assumed we were talking about the same thing, just because we're church folk, right? So in any situation, we always have to define the terms. What the heck are we talking about? So what are we talking about? What is conflict?
The difference of opinion is what Brenda told us. That's what, at the highest level.
Okay. Say it again.
Conflict is a difference of opinion,
Okay.
like at a high,
Okay. It can, I would say a difference of opinion can lead to conflict.
Oh,
Yep. But yes, that's part of it, definitely. Yeah, what else? What else is conflict?
To feel that you're right and everybody else around you is wrong. So it's either this is the way it should be done, or right, this is how I feel it should be done, and I'm not gonna bow down about it. Right? Yeah, yeah.
It emerges from a mindset, right? I know I'm right. And if these folks could just see it, but if they choose not to see it, whatever. Well, how are we gonna grow as individuals if we always go around thinking we're right about everything? What else?
Instead of moving parallel toward a goal, you are perpendicular because people aren't going the same. Well, think of driving. If you're going parallel, that's pretty good. But if somebody decides all of a sudden to go perpendicular, there's going to be a crash.
When things go sideways, literally. Yeah, we can be headed for the same goal, but coming from different directions and taking different paths to get there.
The refusal to accept change or transition.
I like that. The refusal to accept change or transition. So it's not only not doing it well, but just saying, I ain't gonna do it. Okay, this is what it is, and we're staying like this. I think you also just find church. Right? It's what we do. This is who God called us to be in 1954. And this is how we're going to do things. And if they out there could just see that they need what we have, then they'd be here. But they just can't see it. So how do we tell them? How do we show them? It's not like that. Frederick Buechner talked about vocation and calling, and he had kind of a formula, right? He said it's where your greatest passions meet the world's deepest needs. That's where you're called to be. And I would add one more variable there, it's most likely Z. I'd say Z is your skills and talents. Right? And if that's the case, then calling shifts. Vocation changes. It depends on you, it depends on your context, and it depends on the skills. A lot of times we seek our calling as being one thing. It's this one lifelong thing, whether we think of it as the church's calling or our own calling, right? There's one thing that I'm called to, but by golly, I just cannot figure out what it is. Right? We're so focused on that one thing that we're supposed to be doing all our lives, we just wander around and we never find it. Instead, if we would see that our calling is right there in front of us. You got a hungry person right there, right? If you got a group of kids who are struggling to make ends meet and they've come from a system of recurring poverty, but you have accounting or business skills and you could show them how to fish and not just, right, giving them fish to eat. And it's your passion. Ta-da. You found your calling for right now. And when those people are no longer in poverty and the system has been reversed, or when you just no longer have passion for it, or you realize that you've exhausted your skill set, okay. Now your calling is what? Do the math again. X plus Y plus Z, where you're at right now. So churches also need to learn that these things change. Okay. All right, so now these questions, there is an ancient Tibetan Buddhist practice that's called feeding your demons. And it's powerful, and it sounds very weird, but what the practice is it can either be guided by like a spiritual director, or you can do it yourself. And basically you take two chairs and put them facing each other, and you sit there and you imagine your demon sitting across from you. And you ask it questions. What do you want? What do you need? How will you feel if you get what you need? And what will you contribute to ensure it happens? And then you switch chairs and you imagine that you are that demon and you're talking to yourself and you ask the same questions. And then you go back again to your own seat. And what happens is that demon kind of dissolves and becomes something else, something that can help you on your journey. So again, it sounds really kooky. It's very therapeutic, but in a system, in a congregation, in any setting, these are the questions that we need to know. Right? So if you have conflict and you want to transform it, we need to know, what do you want? What do you need? What does asking those two things do? Yeah, Eric.
It helps you know what's important.
Helps you know what's
There's a big
important.
difference between a need and a want. I
Yes.
need a car and I want a Cadillac Escalade. That's way more than a need.
I'm with you. I tell you, especially after watching Ozark and seeing this, that black Cadillac that Nelson drives, I want that. Yeah, exactly. It helps people be aware that wants and needs are not the same thing. And most of the time we go around thinking that they're the same thing. Well, gee, if I can have the self-awareness to realize that what I want is not exactly what I need, it helps me let go of a lot. What a gift. Whew. I'm happy with my little Chevy that gets 50 miles to the gallon on the highway. I'd love an Escalade, but good God, do I want to pay that gas? No. Yeah.
I think it also opens a conversation. You don't identify those things, what you want, what you need, you can always just drift.
Yeah, starts a conversation, and hopefully a healthy conversation.
I keep thinking of when you're raising a family, you have to pick your battles, what's important and what isn't.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot over the years. I can recommend to my grandchildren how to take care of their kids. I don't know how well I did with mine. At the time I did what I thought was right, but times change and you have to go pick your battles and what's important.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to see come out of this is no matter what the conflict, we still should have love and respect for each other, even though we don't agree.
Mm-hmm. Love that, thank you. That's right. Just because we don't agree doesn't mean we're bad people, and we're going to get to that.
And actually, isn't that the way God works? We pray for something we think we really need, and he gives us something else, and we find out that's what we really needed. We wanted this, but God gives us what we really needed.
Yeah. Yeah. What did Jacob do with the angel or with God before he was blessed and called his? I think I just heard it.
Wrestle.
We're called to wrestle with God. Now Jews are better at it. Jews are more willing to accept the fact that we're supposed to wrestle with God and create midrash and all these different things. They understand the existential angst. But yeah, we're supposed to wrestle with God. We're supposed to wrestle with one another. It's not that we should avoid conflict. Let's have it. Conflict is, so a system that doesn't have conflict gets in what we call stasis, right? It's everything, all the gears come to a grinding halt and then rust. And good luck getting that machine going again. We always say it's easier to steer a moving vessel, right? Conflict keeps us moving. Healthy conflict. Unhealthy conflict will sink us. Right? But healthy conflict keeps us moving and also helps us to make those incremental shifts. Right? Lee, I don't agree with you, but I value you as a human being, and I'm asking myself, here's the key, I'm asking myself right now, what am I learning from this? It's not about what do I need you to understand, what am I learning from this? And that's where the shift occurs. And if we're both asking ourselves that, wow, we're going to learn how to dance. And we're going to find this place, not only that it's not a compromise, It's the place where we need to be.
When conflict, you have to have respect for somebody.
Yes. Yes. So to have healthy conflict, you have to have respect. We're gonna go into what elements need to exist. How will you feel if you get what you need? Why is that important?
It makes you feel wonderful.
Makes you feel wonderful, yeah. And psychologically, neurologically, when those endorphins are flying around and you've got the dopamine going, oh, that feels good. I want more of that. And that's what happens. Remember last time we talked about the positive emotional attractors and the negative emotional attractors, right? There's the, Barbara, help me understand why you can't get this right. Okay, well, that was a question and it was technically open-ended, but gosh, that was not good, right? So that puts you back in your amygdala and you're ready to duke it out, right? But if I say, how can we partner to get you to where you want to be? That feels much better, right? So how do you feel if you get what you need? Holy cow. I may want people to listen to me, but what I need is to be heard. What I need is to be affirmed. What I need is to be accepted. Well, how are you going to feel if you are affirmed? I'm going to feel like I'm a valued human being. I'm going to feel great. I'm going to feel like I belong. I'm going to feel connection. And then what will you contribute to ensure it happens? Well, I just kind of had a glimpse, a feeling of what that might look like. And if I can make this a permanent thing, I'm willing to act. Right? Well, what am I willing to do? Hey, I'm willing to have some difficult conversations. I'm willing to accept the fact that I'm not always right. I'm willing to accept the fact that when Jesus showed up after his death, after the resurrection, he still had the wounds. Right? He still had the wounds. I'm willing to accept that we all have our broken spots. But like Rumi and Leonard Cohen said, that for the like sake. And I'm willing to accept that in me and in you. Right? There's some transformation that happens when we honestly ask these questions of ourselves and one another.
It's also where God makes us stronger. So God's strength works through those cracks where we've been broken.
Yeah.
That's why I like 2 Corinthians 12.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where our strength is. I mean, we can choose, if we've experienced trauma, for example, right? We can choose to let that destroy us and immobilize us and paralyze us, or we can choose to have it make us stronger and wiser and help us to be able to bring that gift to other people, right? Who have experienced trauma in general or similar trauma. All of us carry something, right? All of us carry some sort of a wound. I was talking to a guy who buys and sells businesses and just chatting along, and he started to tell me about how he had been a volunteer fireman for 22 years. And he said he just realized that as he's getting closer to retirement and as he's slowing down, there's more time to just sit with things. And he starts to remember things like charred bodies and mangled bodies in car accidents and dead people and all these things that he'd been running from, right? And his father, who was in Vietnam, who he bought his father a fishing boat when Dad retired. And then he realized that, Dad, you're not using your boat anymore. How come you're not fishing? He says, because when it's just me out there on that still water, and all I've got is myself and my thoughts, I remember things I don't want to remember. Right? If we can lean into those rough spots and turn them into scars instead of bleeding wounds, and if we can do that together, that's a gift. Okay. All right. Now we're getting down to the meat and taters here. Healthy conflict happens in vulnerable cultures. And this starts from the top. So remember, leadership creates cultures. Leadership creates and exudes systems. If you have a leader, not just a pastor, but leaders of ministries and boards and committees and council and so on and so forth that are not vulnerable, you're not going to have a vulnerable system. And vulnerable doesn't mean that you're bleeding on your audience, so to speak, right? Doesn't mean you're sharing every horrific experience that ever happened to you. Vulnerable is saying, you know, this isn't my strong suit. I could use a little bit of help here. Because I know, Mike, I know you're better at this than I am. Let's partner on this. That's vulnerability, right? That's healthy. It's saying, so the other day I tried this thing and it did not go well. And so, as they say, the wise person learns from, or the smart person learns from their mistakes, but the wise person learns from others' mistakes. So I'm going to give you that gift and say, don't do it this way because it doesn't work out well. That's vulnerable to admit that you screwed up. So what? Be comfortable talking about elephants in the room. Mine for conflict as a leader. Say it again. Mine for conflict. We're actually looking for this stuff. We've already got enough of it. Why are we looking for it? Right? But there are so many conflicts, so many elephants rather, that exist in every room, in every family, in every church, in every company, in everything. Any relationship. Right? And this is a relationship, by the way. Gotta be comfortable about talking, to talk about those elephants. Otherwise, if you run from them and you avoid them, right, where there's, that's what I call fight or flight. We either duke it out or we run from these things. If we run from them, they never get solved. They never, right, nothing ever fruitful comes from that. So mind for conflict. If you are the type of leader who is looking for a yes man or a yes woman, you're a manager, you're not a leader. Right? Good luck. Good luck having a system that's going to affect any change or do any good. But if you as a leader say, so this is what I'm hearing from you, is this where everybody's at? And give that space for somebody to say, no, actually, that's not where I'm at. Here's what I'm thinking, or here's what I'm feeling. Great, let's have a conversation. Use the influence of moving parts in the whole system to spread positivity, a spirit of transition, and vulnerability. The opposite is the spread of negative conflict as it infects the system. So in other words, I always say, if you know that the violin plays a half step flat, play it a half step sharp and you'll be in tune, right? If you know that the system is broken here and here, use that, not to manipulate, not to be a puppet master, but use that so that you can affect the change that needs to happen. If you understand the system, you know how to use the system, right? If you know what everybody's passions and everybody's gifts and how these two get along and how those two get along and how those two do not get along at all. Okay. Use that knowledge to make the system do what it needs to do. Allow for disagreement and relish it, as it is an opportunity for learning and growth. So it's not that, okay, I am hoping in this meeting that there is not any disagreement. No, look forward to it. Go in there and say, I'm looking forward to see where the disagreement is, because that's where we're going to learn together. If everybody just smiles and nods, guess what's going to happen?
Go nowhere.
You're going to go nowhere. And it's going to be worse than going nowhere. If Pastor Brenda says, okay, I think this is what we need to do. This is what I'm hearing from you. Here's what I'm thinking. Everybody in? Yeah. There's going to be 2 or 3 people in the parking lot after that meeting saying, right? Oh, good luck with that.
Yes.
And then when it fails, because they actually didn't perform the duties that they said they would, Told you.
It's a boundary issue.
It's a boundary issue. Yeah. By golly, if you don't agree at that time, speak up and say you don't agree. You can do that with love and kindness and respect, right? Yeah.
I think so often people don't want to, when they hear the word conflict, they hear hollering, yelling, mean. And so they equate conflict with things that are uncomfortable, that are greatly uncomfortable, that activate the amygdala instead of not so uncomfortable. I mean, there's still discomfort,
Yeah.
but it's manageable discomfort. So the word conflict throws us completely off. We don't want that.
Yeah.
We want this, but we don't know what to call
That's right. We shy away from anything that is uncomfortable, don't we, for the most part? Ooh, I need to talk to my kids about my advanced directives and I will. Ooh, we should have stuff there. Why not? I'm 42. I've had that conversation with my kids. I told them I don't give a crap. I'm dead. Kick my body in the ditch. I don't care. And I asked them, I said, so are you the type of people who are going to go back to a marker and visit whatever remains of me underground there are? Honestly, Dad, I'm not really, I don't know we're going to be living in the future. Okay. Then if it's meaningful for you, cremate me and all of you take a piece of my ashes and throw the rest in the mountains or whatever, right? It's for you. But you gotta have conversations. So in situations where there's conflict or where we think we're going to foment conflict by disagreeing, think about creativity. Think about new things that have emerged. Has anything ever emerged or been birthed or been created that didn't come through a time of dis-ease and discomfort? I can't think of something.
Something you said sparked my, something I want to say that I see in general, for myself, when it comes to conflict, or something that happens right in front of you that is inappropriate or conversation, for me, I'm one of those that's more of a deer in headlights, where I'm that can be that yes person, in the sense that if I have something, I'll put it in my pocket first. And I think, a lot of what I've seen in churches, you get the other side, this completely opposite side of the spectrum. People are very passionate about something that's going on in conflict, and they go overboard on the other side. Comes across aggressive, negative, inappropriate. And so I think maybe the key obviously is getting comfortable finding that place in the middle where we have an open, where we can speak our minds appropriately in a good way, but we're not shying away from it, and we're not being over aggressive.
Right.
So that's not where we are, I don't think, but I think it would take work to get there, training them. So I don't, if there's workshop, something that we can get there.
Yeah, we are very binary in our thinking, aren't we? This is either going to explode or it's going to be no, nothing is like that.
Okay, I'm listening carefully to what Mark said, and that is again, what you just said was setting our boundaries. That is exactly what you just expressed, is that we don't become over aggressive, or we don't fight, we don't flight, but it's when we confront, it's setting our boundaries of how we talk to people within the church, talk to maybe visitors, and express what we want without being aggressive. And that's just in our minds, setting our boundaries, how we communicate back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, and that exists both in the dyad and in the triad. So what I mean by that is, if I disagree with Pastor Brenda, I need to learn a way to express it with love and be willing to learn in the experience. When I walk into that situation and initiate this conversation, I better have a lot of good questions ready for myself and be curious as I go in, versus my goal is to convince her that I am right. The triad is if you see somebody go to Pastor Brandyn and say, your sermons are way too long, chick, get it together or get out of here. Or whatever, right? As an example. Okay, here's the triad. I'm going to come in and go to that person and say, hey, I totally respect the fact that you don't like longer sermons and how you're feeling. I'm wondering if there's a better way that might be expressed, right? You don't have to, dude, what's the matter with you? You don't have to do that. So how we converse here, right, is all up to us. And that person may get their hackles up and they may be like, what are you talking about? Well, she needs to figure it out. She needs to learn. Nobody likes long sermons. Okay. What is it about long sermons that bothers you? What do you mean? Everybody's bothered by long sermons. Why? I feel like I'm going to stand up here. Okay, I got another career coming. But really, right? It's. Can we talk about this? You know, there are ways to do it. And it will be uncomfortable, especially if that person is naturally confrontational. If you ask them, okay, what do you need? What do you need right now? Well, I need people to start listening to me because I feel like everybody's always trying to push me out, not hear me. So I'm hearing you say you need to be heard. What does that do for you? How do you feel when you're heard, right? And we have to be careful, right? We can't just go and start coaching somebody without permission or therapizing when we don't even know how to do it. But when we do that, we genuinely should be having a conversation with somebody with the goal of us having a relationship now. So yes, allow for disagreement and relish it as it's an opportunity for learning and growth. And always, always, always keep that in mind, right? It's, when it comes to, good, here's an opportunity. What am I going to learn from this? When I was on sabbatical, I asked myself every day, what am I curious about? And I'd spend the whole day trying to figure out what the answer was to that question, right? Living that question for the day as I was hiking through the Rockies or the Olympic Mountains or wherever I was, or whatever I was doing. I was driving from Illinois to New Mexico. What am I curious about? So enter those situations the same way. What am I curious about? What do I want to learn from this? How is this going to make me a better person? How is this going to make us a better partnership? How is it going to make us a better congregation? So we're digging in deeper and getting closer and closer to how do we turn negative conflict into healthy conflict, right? So again, we're not trying to avoid negative conflict. It's there. We have to learn how to transform it. We don't want to get rid of conflict completely. We want it, but we want it to be healthy. So, know and respect one another's personalities and behavioral preferences. For example, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram, right? Any of those things, the Harrison assessment. So basically what those things tell us is how that person operates and why. It was funny, I've been working with Gucci and they did the DISC assessment. And then I asked one of my clients, I said, so did you guys like get together as a team and discuss your results? No. Well, what good does that do then? Okay, I know who I am now. Well, I already knew that, right? I need to know how you operate and why. We need to have these conversations because if I think, well, you're just lazy, or you just are a chicken to speak up, or whatever, but I understand, oh wait, you're an introvert who is more focused on this and that, or you are terrible at execution. Well, maybe, you're probably great at planning, better than me, so let's figure out how to partner on this instead of being like, well, you never get things done. right? And in that partnership, new things will emerge, but it's important to understand each other's personalities and not automatically label them, right? He's a jerk, she's lazy, that person's a nitpicker. Let's back up from the labels and get to understand how and why we operate. Usually, well, there's two things, right? There's our personality type, and then there's our stories. The question is always, what story are you telling yourself right now? I use that a lot with my coaching clients, executive, right? The chief of strategy at Deutsche Bank, global strategy, right? What story are you telling yourself right now? So if I'm not good enough to do this, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not whatever, right? Or it could be that I'm right and they're wrong, or whatever, right? Where's that story come from? Right? So analyzing that for ourselves, what story am I telling myself right now as I go into this situation? I'm telling myself that this fool needs to learn that, Oh. Okay, if I'm up on the balcony and I just noted that I just said this fool, okay, now I know I need to pause because I'm coming from a very judgmental place right now. I'm probably back here in my amygdala, nothing happening in the prefrontal cortex. All right, what do I need to do before I go into this? Okay. Ask yourself, what story are you telling yourself right now? And it's a good one to also use. Brandyn talks about using it when you're in interpersonal relationships, right? I think she mentioned it about her husband making sandwiches and stuff, right? She's going, the story I'm telling myself right now is that you don't care about what I do around this household. But I feel that's probably not true. So can you share with me what story you're telling yourself here? Wow, oh my gosh, that opens it up for some beautiful conversation, right? Avoid artificial harmony and intentionally introduce constructive conflict. And this serves as a catalyst to bring a system out of stasis and to keep it evolving. So, smiling and nodding when you're really thinking, oh no, don't do it. If you have the opportunity to speak up in love and kindness and respect and compassion, and share where you're at. While you're doing so, ask yourself, what am I learning right now? What story am I telling myself right now? And be willing to hear when that person shares. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean necessarily that, okay, you say something, that person says something, okay, everything's perfect. No, there may be a lot of discourse that goes back and forth to move that ball up and down the line to where it needs to be. And again, don't look at it as compromise. Compromise means there's a huge opportunity cost, right? So if you both compromise it, well, I'm happy enough. Yeah, I'm happy enough. Okay, let's do this. Well, there's a whole lot of good stuff that was just left out. Don't compromise. Be compassionate, right? And get to a place, the deeper place. Go through that dark stuff and get to that deeper place where you're both meeting each other's actual needs. Because compromise happens at the one level. Because we are interconnected as human beings, right? Created in the image of the same God, containing the same God, our needs are more aligned than we think. So if we get out of the wants and get through all of the stories and all the wounds and everything else, and get down there where it all matters, where the roots are, sunk deep into the soil, we realize we're much more aligned than we thought we were. And we're able to get to that place where we both are genuinely able to thrive as human beings. Ask positive, open-ended questions. So like I said before, when introducing constructive conflict, activate the positive emotional attractors and engage creativity. This is where the creative tension lives that is waiting to birth something new. Say that you've had a conversation with somebody and you know they are not on board at all. But when Pastor Brenda or whomever says, everybody in? And that person nods, You don't, you just told me when we pulled up here that you hate that idea. Why are you nodding? No, don't do that. But you may introduce a constructive question that speaks to whatever that person has shared, right? So you're not violating their confidence by calling them out. Otherwise, they're not going to want to speak up again, right? But you can ask a constructive, open-ended question that will open the space for creativity, and that person then can start interjecting, right? And there can be a dialogue or a wider conversation that'll get everybody where they need to be. Play in the sandbox. So often we, again, binary thinking, right? This is either going to fail or it is going to succeed. I am going to fail or I am going to succeed. They, we, right, insert whatever pronoun, are going to fail or going to succeed. It's nothing real exists in those realms, nothing at all. Was the invention of Post-it notes a failure? Was the invention of the light bulb a failure? But, right? Einstein said that experimentation is the root of all success. There's a Japanese saying that says "Shippai wa seiko no moto," which means that mistakes are the root of success. Not really mistakes, right? That you've heard that acronym, FAIL means first attempt in learning. If you have that mindset and say everything is an experiment, it's not a do or die. We are trying something. And it's not all going to be bad or all going to be good. There's going to be room for incremental change. And we're going to go one step forward, going to make that shift. We're going to go another step forward, make a shift. And if we're all on that same page of experimentation and not like, you promised us this was going to work, and look what happened. What are you talking about? Nothing works that way, right? So we need to get it out of our heads, any binary thinking, but especially failure and success, good or bad, black or white, so on and so forth. When conflict goes past the ideal conflict point, give it space. So what that means is a lot of times if two people are starting to get a little revved up and you see the steam starting to come out a little bit, we kind of jump in to make sure that nothing gets ugly because, oh gosh, I feel really uncomfortable. So I'm either gonna, hey, oh, I forgot I got this thing I gotta get to, so, right. Or we're gonna, guys, hey, whoa, we're all on the same team here. Let it go a little bit. Let it go to a point where you're a little uncomfortable. Now, if it starts to go where it looks like it's going to explode, then you come in and interrupt and remind them that what they're doing is good. It reduces guilt and the chance for lasting shame, negativity, and hurt relationships. So, how many times have you done something that immediately you're like, oh, crap, I should not have done that. Right? And your spouse or whomever calls you out on it. But because you feel shame at what you just did, even though you know it was wrong, you batten down the hatches and put up higher walls. And you defend yourself even more, right? Because you're feeling shame. We don't want to get to that point. If we tell somebody, whoa, that's uncalled for. What's the matter with you? Well, we've just shamed that person. And now that person is either, what? Well, nobody ever listens to me. And you guys are just a bunch of jerks. You don't want to learn anything anyway. You know what? I'm done. I'm out of here. And they probably won't show their faces for a while because they feel like the story they're telling themselves is that everybody thinks they're an idiot or a jerk or whatever. But if instead we're to say, hey, time out. This is good. This is good. This is a great opportunity. But what are you both learning right now? Ooh, we just shifted out of here and now we're up here. What am I learning right now? Right? Give them that opportunity to learn. instead of automatically saying, knock it off. Create the culture with buy-in from everyone, make it their idea. So what kind of culture do you want? Did you just snap your fingers, et cetera, et cetera. So say you have that council, or you have that wider leadership group. And instead of going in and saying, oh, here's what we need to do. You're with me, right? Ask the questions. Right? What kind of culture would you like to have? So let's do that right now. What kind of culture would you all like to have?
A happy culture.
A happy culture, okay? So let's dig into that one, right? Happiness generally is the elicited emotion from how we perceive what somebody did to or for us, is a general definition, right? How do we contribute to creating happiness in culture then?
By making others happy.
By making others happy, right? Happy people make other people happy, yeah? What else?
Having a positive attitude.
Having a positive attitude. So if that emotion is elicited from our perception, change our perceptions, right? If our perception is already in a positive realm, most likely we're going to experience something positively. If we're already in a snarky place and defensive, and somebody makes a comment that isn't even meant to be, we're going to be like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
For me, an environment that involves relationships, our strong relationships with one another, and ultimately our strong relationship with God.
Thank you. So relational culture. How can you contribute to creating a relational culture?
Speaking up.
Speaking up. It's not relational if you're silent. And you're seething and you're like, oh, actually, this is not good. It's not what I want. Speak up. For yourself, for others.
Respectful.
Respectful. You can't be relational if you're not respectful. I'm pretty sure I told you the last time the thing about the tadpole and the frog, but I'm going to tell you again, because this is what this is about. So remember that Buddhist priest who came to our temple when I was living in Tokyo. He came up from Kyoto and he said, "Watamajashi wa shizen ni kairu ni naru. Shikashi ningen no akachan wa shizen ni ningen nashi ningen no narenai." You're with me so far, right? Okay. He said a tadpole will naturally become a frog, but a human baby will not naturally become a humane human being without first learning love, kindness, respect, and compassion. And when one learns those things and operates from a place of asking, what effect are my words and actions going to have on another? When we're aware of our interconnectedness, that's what it means to be enlightened. That's what it means to be a Buddha. And when I heard that, I thought, that was Jesus' message before the church ruined it. Right? But we are not humane human beings without love, kindness, respect, and compassion. We need those things to be relational. We're already interconnected, whether we like it or not. But to be able to do that in a healthy way, we have to have those traits. What else? What other kind of culture would you want? So you want happy, we'll say joyful, relational. What other kind of culture would you like to have here?
Less judgmental. I won't say no judgment because that's impossible, but I've had lots of time to figure out how many judgmental thoughts come in your mind every day, all day long.
Less judgmental, yeah. In a sense, it's having more awareness of our judgments or our biases, right? So it goes back to those questions. What am I curious about? What story am I telling myself? Ooh, The story, oh, whew, all my biases are coming out in the story right now. I need to pause and take a deep breath before I engage. Yeah, right?
There's a story I don't remember the details of, but everything I learned about life, I learned in kindergarten.
Yes.
I don't remember the details of it.
Yeah.
But whatever that was, if we live that, I keep going back to, you gotta own it and live it.
Yeah.
You can't know the checkoff list and not live it, because if you live it an hour a week or one day a week, it's not part of your DNA.
Mm.
And so everything we've talked about has to be internalized and owned. That's another example.
Mhm.
Everything I need to learn about life is I learned in kindergarten.
Yep. Yep. Everything I need to learn about life, I learned in kindergarten. And owning your own stuff. Listen to the voices in your head. I'm not talking about a need for medication. I'm talking about, well, if only they did, if only she. If you catch yourself saying they, she, if only, if you hear conditionals, if you hear, well, you always, well, she never. Pause, breathe. That story I'm telling myself right now. What's the true story? Meister Eckhart said, only the hand that erases can write the true thing. What do I need to erase right now before I go and have this conversation? The belief that only I am right. The belief that she's a jerk because she usually doesn't agree with me. The fact, right? Oh, the fact. Oh, geez. No, I'm saying the facts. Right? Check all those things. I know it's tiring, but guess what? Do it a few times and you get better. What else? What other kind of culture would you like?
I'd like to have a dynamic culture, open to change.
Dynamic, open to change.
Not stuck in the way church was 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, the goal isn't to get back to the good old days, because the good old days were an illusion, especially right now. We don't have the elements and the factors to have things the way they used to be. And the way they used to be wouldn't fit in the current context anyway. Let's trust God to give us a new vision. Let's trust ourselves to live into it. Let's accept that change is continuous, that we are in process, that we are becoming, and let's learn how to transition into those changes so that we might become. Remember that scripture in Revelation 2:17. To those who are becoming, not to those who are victorious, to those who have overcome, to those who have conquered, to those who are becoming, I will give a smooth white stone, and on it shall be written a name, and only those who receive it shall understand it. Well, gosh, if you're not in the mindset of becoming, sure as heck aren't going to understand that name written there for you. It's a mindset that has to exist in order for the transition and the change to happen. What else? What other kind of culture would you like?
I guess you said don't sit there and go, no, and blink your head. Yeah, it's okay. So one thing you said that just, I guess, triggered something in me, that the past was an illusion. Not so. The past was the past. It's not what it is now. It can't be what it is now.
Yeah.
But it was not an illusion.
At the time.
It was the basis of who I am.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Right, the past was what it was at the time. Now, there's also the reality that even in the present right now, right? There are things I'm making things out to be that aren't reality. So therefore, if the present's now and then we move ahead 30 years, well, now it's the past, and the past was an illusion. So that's what I mean. I'm not saying it wasn't real to some or real to all in many ways, but there are also biases and other things that were interjected through our lens, right? We see everything, we see each other, we see the world, we see everything through a lens. We have to clean our glasses. Got to see things how they really are. But it's those questions that help us do that. So we want happy / joyful, relational, aware, self-aware of our own biases. What's the other one? I'm missing one more. Dynamic kind of culture. Giving. Respectful of others.
I would add, be willing to forgive and others and yourself.
Thank you for that. And yourself. Yeah. Being willing to forgive. Forgive and forget. Good luck. You can forget. But you can forgive, including yourself. I think that's the difference between shame and guilt, right? If I forgive myself, I turn the shame into guilt. Guilt is okay to an extent. You know, to say, I could have and should have done that better, versus I'm a piece of crap and I keep screwing up. It's not healthy. And I think our Christian theology is sometimes unhealthy, right? So it only makes sense. Think about this for a minute. It only makes sense that churches could become unhealthy because where's our base point? I am a lowly piece of poo, and if it weren't for the love of Christ and God's sacrifice of my Savior, I'd be doomed. I'm not making fun of the Christian message that many adhere to. I'm saying it's unhealthy, depending on how we interpret it, right? How about?
I think.
Yes, please.
I was going to say, sorry, what Mark had said about the forgive and forget. I think we need to change that so that instead it's, yes, we do need to forgive, but we need to forgive and learn. Because it's, if you're forgetting, then you are not using the conflict that was there in order to move forward. So you have to forgive and learn from it and go forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in disclosure, Mark didn't say forget. I threw that in as if.
Well,
So,
I couldn't
yeah.
hear Mark real well, so that's okay.
Yeah. But yes, you're right. That's exactly what it is. Forgive and learn. I like that. Yeah, not forgive and forget. Forgive and learn. It's a learning process for all of us. So how do we create this culture?
Be vulnerable.
Vulnerable. We talked a little bit about what that means. It ain't easy. Yeah.
We have to be intentional about it.
Be intentional. Yeah.
Be authentic and transparent.
Authentic and transparent. So let me check in so far on these: vulnerable, authentic, and transparent. Are we able to do that? I guess I'm asking for yourself. Ask yourself that, right? If you can, great. If you're at a place where authentic is okay, but vulnerable, transparency, no, I just feel like I get slapped down every time I'm transparent. So, right, lean into those things and ask yourself why. Why can't I be transparent? Why can't I be vulnerable? What story am I telling myself? Right? Write the right story for yourself so you can do those things. Because when you get to the point where you can and you do, and you're intentional about doing those things, you're going to have the culture that you want. But remember, the parts, takes everybody, affect the whole. How else are you going to create this culture, this system that you want?
Keep having conversations.
Keep having conversations. The conversation never stops. There's never a point when Okay, we're done, we're there. Where the heck is there? Right? Remember, we talked like in resurrection, right? We don't go from here to here in 1 week. We go from here to here. We check in, we celebrate, we make our shifts, and we go to here. And repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. And as you do so, and not forgetting to celebrate, not forgetting to do all those things that are important, eventually you find that you're here. Well, what happens when you get here? You realize that here isn't what it looked like back here. It wasn't what you thought it was.
Live out the covenant that we agreed to last fall.
Live out the covenant that you agreed to last fall. Yeah. Yeah, because all that respect and love and compassion and all that stuff is in there. It's built into the covenant. In that fact, there you go. Live the covenant and boom, you've got the culture that you want. What else?
Keep a positive attitude.
Keep a positive attitude. Yeah, if you look, we all have bad days. We all have bad moments. We all have times when we wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We have times when we'd rather be watching the game instead of a Monday night meeting or whatever, right? But if we go into, don't want to be here, but let's just get it out of the way so I can move on with what I want to do. Okay, that's okay. That's how you're feeling, and that's how you're feeling. And be self-aware. Realize you're feeling that way and how you may operate from that place. Shift, right? So that you can operate from a healthy place and be positive. It's, you know, in churches, we have so many platitudes, so many unhelpful comments. My grandfather was an excavator. He owned an excavating company. I started working for him when I was 12. When he died of a heart attack at 57, some said, well, God clearly needed an excavator to build roads for him and up in heaven. Please don't say something like that. Right? That's just one example, but we have lots and lots of platitudes that aren't helpful. Let's focus on the reality. Let's focus on, you know, where we're at. All good things come to those who wait. No, not always. Those who do good things will be reached. Really? Then where's this the Odyssey thing come from? Right? There are no absolutes. Be aware of that. And despite that, have a positive attitude. Is there anything else you want to add to? Yeah, I love it. Go ahead.
I think that we need to learn to ask the open-ended questions because it doesn't come to people naturally. You have to work on it, you have to practice. I took a course in it, one of the nursing courses, and it's hard to always, you know, ask open-ended questions.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as it sounds.
It is not at all, because we are wired to do the opposite.
That's correct.
We always say practice makes perfect. I had a music teacher in high school that says, actually practice makes permanent. Right, so if we've been asking closed-ended questions from a certain place, that's what we're conditioned to do. That's what we've learned. But we can recondition ourselves, right? And so maybe even go into a council meeting, for example, with a piece of paper. And every time you catch yourself asking a closed-ended question, make a check mark, right? Okay, I asked 7 closed-ended questions and 9 open-ended questions. Getting better. Next month, do the same thing. Right? If you're on council and you're on CE and you're right at work, it's everywhere is an opportunity. Talking to your partner or your spouse or your kids or who, right? Keep the tally. There you had something. That's
We need to practice SPD, scripture, prayer, discernment. We need to build a relationship with our Lord. We need to nurture that relationship. And through the study of scripture, prayer, and discernment, we grow individually and as a community.
Yes.
The moral of that is stay centered. Right? When we are not centered, we just flail about like a drowning person. And whatever centering means to you, it's not to one person, it may be yoga. To one person, it may be a walk in the woods. To another, it may be journaling, right? Whatever, listening to Tchaikovsky, whatever centers you, do it every day. Make it a rhythm of daily life. Whatever draws you closer to God, your true self, whatever centers you, right? Because, well, I just got a lot to do today, and I'll get to it if I can. No. If you have to put it on a calendar every day, then do it. If you have to have Siri remind you every day, then do it. Because it's an investment. It's not when I get to it. Think about it. If you got your pension, your 401k, your 403b, your IRA, your whatever, right? You don't say, well, I'm going to make a contribution when I get around to it. And then you're 65 and you're like, oops. You make it automatic. Take it out of my check and put it in my pension. Take it in, right? Why? Because it's an investment so that someday you can say, oh, thank God I was centered in that moment. Because if I wasn't, it would have really gone sideways. Because we have plenty of examples of when we went off and we weren't centered. Trivial things. Your spouse keeps leaving the toothpaste open or the toilet lid up or whatever and whatever. Where do you do that?
Just because I can.
Just because I can. You don't even respect me. You don't care about my thoughts. You don't care that I clean this counter every day. And if I go into this when I'm centered, it's a very different conversation with a very different outcome. When that person cuts me off on the highway,
I'm sure you smiled, yes.
oh, I do. God bless you. I'm about to kill you. No. But if I'm not centered, I might be, right? Oh, you jerk. I'll show you. Oh, goody. Let's do that. Let's road rage and put everybody else in danger. Ooh, great idea. Right. But if I'm in a different place, I don't necessarily say, oh, that's fine. That was good. It may have ticked me off, but I'm still able to say, whatever. Is there another slide?
Let's look.
I think we're... Okay, so just go through these real quick because I'm aware of the time. So have complete and healthy transitions. We talked about that, and we'll go more into it in the next session. Train the lay leaders. So again, we like to put warm bodies in chairs in churches, right? We need somebody to lead this committee or this team or this ministry. Will you do it? Will you do it? We don't consider, we do consider the skills usually, but we consider the hard skills, right? You're an accountant, please be our treasurer. You're a teacher, please lead Christian education. Okay. And you're a community organizer, please lead our justice and witness team. Okay. But we don't train our leaders on the soft skills, right? We don't have training, real actual training on how to lead. So we need to do that. Have clear covenants and boundaries, we talked about that. Create a vulnerable culture from the top. Have good mission and vision questions, steer the ship. So we want our values to be, they don't change. Our values are our values. But our mission and our vision, as soon as we print them out or put them on the boardroom wall on a nice plaque, they're obsolete. Because everything is changing, everything's in flux. But if we have, for example, 5 good mission questions and 5 good vision questions that we can check in on quarterly or whatever, well, by golly, we can make those incremental shifts along the way instead of having to say, okay, it's been 5 years, time for us to reevaluate our mission, vision, values. Good luck. You're gonna take a sledgehammer to that foundation and build something new that may or may not work. Occasionally go to the balcony and look at the system, know your values, and hold the rest loosely. So what matters, what doesn't matter? Don't get locked into the tedium. Gotta keep doing that.
That's just to see if he's awake.
All right, so we did this already. Okay, next. There we go. All right. And now the end is near. What are your ahas and takeaways as you were going to? Is everybody willing to create this culture that you all have described?
Willing to try.
Gonna try. Is it gonna be perfect the first time? No. What did you say?
I said, as long as it suits my needs, I'm.
You're honest, you're transparent. Not very going, right? Yeah.
Pray about it, Randy.
Right. But you all have the power, let me say it again, you all have the power to create this culture. That's how it's created. You don't have to be complacent and think, well, unfortunately we have the system, so that's how. You create the doggone system, what are you talking about? So create the system, create the one that you want, create the one that you need. And do it in a healthy way. Thoughts, questions?
Next steps.
Next steps.
What do you see as next steps?
Next steps I see as the practice. Again, it's not, okay, whew, our next council meeting is going to be perfect, or our next whatever. No, it's not. No, it's not.
No.
But when Pastor Brenda opens in prayer and says, God, let us play in the sandbox. Oh, that's right, we're experimenting. Oh, I'm going to try something here. Let me ask this positive open-ended question, because I don't agree right now, right? Do that. Have fun with it. Laugh. It's a joyful thing. We're all, I'm a terrible swimmer. If you threw me in a triathlon and wanted me to swim, have a good laugh, because it would be funny, as long as I don't drown. Right? It's just be willing to have fun with it. Yeah.
I would say, from my perspective, you shared a lot of new ideas and practices and so forth here. And to me, it's kind of overwhelming. And so I had some notes to refer to. So the next time I had some questions about what you were talking about, I could go back maybe, would be helpful. Is it?
You're getting all this. I'm gonna turn this into a PDF, send it to Pastor Brenda, and she can shoot it out to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This session is also being recorded and will be posted on YouTube.
Great.
So you can also rewatch it or rewatch parts of it.
Yeah.
Whenever you want to.
Yes.
Shall we pray? Gracious God, thank you for these people whom you have created in your beautiful and loving image. We pray that they would always remember that they are beautifully and wonderfully made, as are those next to them and around them, even those who do not agree. Help us all to see our stories with clear eyes, the eyes of our hearts, our eyes of our minds. Clear our vision so that we can see one another and ourselves as you see us. Give us the permission, and let us give ourselves the permission to become that which you are calling us to be. Help us to see the name that is written on that smooth white stone, and help us to understand it, and help us along the way to realize that this is a journey, and to laugh and to live and to love as we make our way along. We pray these things in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Enjoy your fire.
Oh, thanks for pushing buttons, Lee.
No problem.